it's joint in that we did discuss what we're going to talk about, so I'm hopefully going to keep to 10 minutes. I
should apologise to both Alicia and Kirstie because they have the graveyard slot in the train purely by chance.
Okay, so I'm Alicia, Owen, I'm a learning technologist here, and I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to screencasting, and I'm quite fortunate in that some of the people who've already spoken today have already done that for me a little bit. So first question is, what is a screencast? So screencast is when you use screen capture software, for example BB FlashBack, which is what I'm going to be looking at, to record what you can see or what you're doing on the screen. Mike kindly showed us an example of this earlier when he was showing us Audacity. So you could hear Mike speaking and you could see what you could see on the screen. So it does normally include audio narration, it doesn't have to. You can leave out the audio and you can use clicks of the mouse and things to go to students and text and things. But the good thing about a screen capture is that the sounds on the presentation are recorded simultaneously. You don't then need to go back and try and put them together. Why are we talking about this now? Well, Glyndwr now has a site license for this software called BB FlashBack. We've gone with BB FlashBack because, unlike some of the free software that's available on the internet, that's very useful, but BB FlashBack doesn't have a time limit. So I know a few people in here have been using Jing in the past, and you're stuck at 5 minutes, but you can go over that with BB FlashBack. The other nice thing about it is that you can include a webcam if you want to. If you want to show people your face while you're talking, you can do that. And the other thing you can do is edit. That was the big thing that we liked, is that you can then go back and make changes to your recording. So if you get a cough in the middle, if the phone goes, or if there's bits you want to add, miss out, you can also zoom in, you can add text, you can add pauses so the student has to click, and you can highlight parts. All you need basically is a software and a microphone and speakers. If you're a staff member here, it's quite likely you might already have the software on your machine. It would be from the Start programme under Common Apps probably. If you haven't got it and you'd like it, please email me and I will speak to IT to get it put onto your machine. Okay, so some ideas for using a screencast, and I'm just going to quickly show you a little bit of a few of them, is perhaps to show students as a tutorial how to use an application or a piece of software, and just hopefully this will work if I'm logged into the right browser. As an example, this is what we do with our support videos for students and staff. It hasn't worked. Okay. Sorry, logged into the wrong browser obviously. Thought I was being clever, logging in and ahead of myself. Should have tried that in here. Okay, so for example, on our moving support for students sites, we've got some videos on here that we've created using BB FlashBack. And for example, if a student wants to know how to submit an assignment in Moodle, they can go to here.
In this tutorial, I'll explain how to submit an assignment.
But if we
Try to upload your assignment, make sure you have saved it to an appropriate place on your computer or device at home, and that you have named it appropriately. It would be a good idea to include your student name or ID in the document name so that it can be easily located later by the tutor. To submit your assignment, click on the underlined link next to the assignment icon to get to the submission point. In the top box, you'll see...
You get the idea, so you can show students what's happening on the screen and talk to them explaining what's going on. Okay. So you can explain the software, you can also explain how to do something, and I know that the Academic Study Skills team have done this in the past. They've created math screencasts. I don't know if you've done anything else, but on their site there are screencasts explaining to students how to do some things. And the good thing about it is that because everything's on the screen, the student doesn't have to jump between the notes and the screen, it's just all there. So you could probably, I don't know, maybe computing could use it to explain different software or programming, something like that. And it's really useful to provide material for distance learners, perhaps instead of live sessions, but also perhaps just to have a bit of contact with the students. Another use we've made of it is to introduce staff or students to your course. We're hoping this one works this time. This is oh no. Okay. So we got this. When I came here a day the other day, this all worked perfectly, didn't it?
It did.
Okay, so this is a course that is still under construction, and it's designed to help staff who haven't used Moodle before learn about Moodle in a Moodle course. Okay. And I've got an example here of what Liz was talking about earlier, a book, the Moodle book. I don't know if you've ever been using this before. But what I did here was, and this was something I was doing for Clive's course originally, was give the students a bit of an idea of what's coming on the course and what to expect, how to use it, and then I embedded a video that I'd created with BB FlashBack. That's something you can do, and that's what Liz was talking about in
Welcome to the Moodle Essentials course, where hopefully we can help you to get started using Moodle 2. I'm Alicia, Owen, and I want to just show you around our course site. Okay, so here I am logged in to the Moodle Essentials course, and I'm on the front page of the course. First thing I want
another use we've thought about, and I'm not sure there's too much of this going on yet, could be to use screencasting to record lectures. There's probably a bit of controversy about this. But you could actually record a live lecture if you wanted to. If you had the right kind of microphone, you could have a clip microphone and microphone sitting here while you walked around. Or you could pre-record bits of a lecture in chunks. Probably if this was online, and you wouldn't want to be doing an hour-long lecture because, you know, what student's going to sit there and listen to that from home. But again, the good thing about doing this is you don't need to set up a camera to get your lecture recorded. You'll get the key elements of the lecture, the voice on the presentation, without needing the camera. And some of the literature shows that students are quite keen on this, and they go back to, okay, yes, they might use it to make up for a lecture that they didn't turn up to. But one thing that they've found that students are doing is using it to revise, using it to check the notes that they've made, and so on. And then one thing it does mean, if you put your lectures online, that you can devote your contact time with students to do something a bit more interesting and innovative. And this is often known as flipping the classroom. If you're interested in this, then Clive's running a session on the 9th of April in the morning. I don't know what room it's in, but you can contact him if you're interested in that. Okay. There are issues to consider if you're going to be recording lectures. If you're going to record live, the big issue is consent of the performers. You can have a look at some of the information that GIST provide. They've got legal information on that, so you would need, in effect, to have the permission of the students in the room, because they could be doing things like asking questions, even if you can't see them on your screen capture. Copyrights, of course, you need to make sure you're citing your references, your pictures, etc. I know we're all guilty sometimes of not doing that completely correctly, but of course the best way to confront this issue is model good practice, isn't it, for students? One issue, of course, is file sizes. I'll show you in a minute. When you create the screencast, it can be quite a big file size that is created, but there are ways of getting around this. You can save it as a flash format, which is smaller. You can upload to YouTube if you don't mind other people seeing it, or you can always enlist it, so it would only be people who've got the link anyway to see it. And then, you know, sorry, it's quite a small letter room, isn't it? you know, a lot of tutors worry, will students actually turn up to lectures? Again, looking in the literature, the consensus seems to be that that doesn't really have a big impact on whether students turn up or not. More important is who's speaking, what the topic is, and whether you add something extra to the lecture, a bit of interaction that makes it worth them coming in the first place. Okay. So talk about tutorials, lectures, and then the last thing to think about is assessment. There's a couple of big things you could do here. Students could actually use BB FlashBack themselves, and the licence here at Glyndwr does actually cover student machines. So if you're interested in that, there are a couple of labs here that students could use. Get in touch and we'll tell you about those. For example, you could ask them to do a presentation and upload that to Moodle or email it to you. But the big thing that's happening at the moment is people are starting to use screencasting for feedback, and that's something that Kirstie is going to talk about in a few minutes, if I stop talking at any point. And what you can do with the file that's created from Screencast for feedback is send it to the student as an email, or you can upload it as you would a response file in Moodle, just from the text file. Okay, so just very quickly to show you how you can do this. This is the logo you're looking for on your machine if you're looking for BB FlashBack. All you do is open it up. If you've not used it before, it won't necessarily be on your desktop, it'll be on the Start menu under Programs, Common Apps, BB Software. Okay, it might try and update on you. Okay. Simple as record your screen. You can select whether you want to do the full screen or a region or the window that is active at the time. This is what I need to do. You do, of course, need a microphone. And I have to try to not push this computer over. Okay. Oh, there we go. Just to show you, I'll go back to my PowerPoint. And show you how I could record my PowerPoint and talk over it if I wanted to. Okay, so hello, this is Alicia, and I'm doing an introduction to screencasting. Blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't just have to be PowerPoint, of course. I can show them what's going on with Moodle. So I can, for example, say, today I'm going to show you how to use our Moodle support for staff sites. Click here. And on our site, you can see that we've got how-to guides if you want to know how to do particular things with Moodle. If you're interested in quizzes, for example, which Barry was talking about earlier, or forums, you can click on our links. Yeah. Okay. Stop. Okay. Then basically, it'll ask if you want to save. Make sure you click the save button, especially if you've been talking for a long time. That would be very, very frustrating. You would give it a name, probably save it to somewhere you're going to remember where it is. Save. Okay. And then this is, you can either just go ahead and export it into a format that would be useful to you to show the students as a screencast. Or if you want to edit it first, you can go ahead and play it. Now, when this opens, sometimes it can, if you've recorded half an hour, it would take a few minutes to open. It's taking a while now. It's like the last TEL meeting all over again where it never actually opens. Hello. Okay, now, all of that at the top looks very complicated. But if any of you have had a go at this already, you know it isn't that complicated. You can either just ignore it all and save it, or you can, you know, if you don't want the recording bit appearing at the beginning or at the end, or if you want to get rid of your cough or the slide you think is no longer any use, you know, you can just do things like delete. There's loads of options in there. You can add sound, you can add text boxes. Sorry, I realise I'm going over a bit here. Sorry. You can have pauses. And if you're interested, we are running a training session on this next Wednesday in L201 at 1 o'clock. But if you can't make that, don't worry, just give us a ring or email and we'll try and help you out. What you then need to do is either export it. I'm just going to export. You see there's different formats you can export it as. Flash is probably the smallest and best quality, and that would be the one that would keep any sort of, if you want the student to click to do anything. So, problem with Flash, of course, it doesn't work on all machines, so if people have got iPads and things, that's going to be an issue. There are other options there. QuickTime and Windows Media Player are lovely quality, but they create massive files. So, if possible, we'd like you to avoid using those, but if it's the only option, if you know everyone in your room, your class has got a Mac, you might have to go for that. And the other option, which is the one we're using quite a bit, is the upload to YouTube. You do need your own YouTube channel, that's easy, just sign up with your Google mail account, set one up if you haven't got one. And you can make videos unlisted so that people can really see it if they've got a link. Even if it's unlisted, we would recommend do not do that if you're using Screencast to create feedback for students. Because then if somebody else has the link, they can email someone else. So please don't do it for feedback. Anything else, not a problem as long as you're happy to share it. Yes, you could do it quite small. Yes, yeah, they are quite small. The quality's not fantastic, but we would like that because it's very small and it just goes up quite easily on Zooms or any practical competency. Shut up now and hand over to Kirstie. Sorry. He's going to be talking about feedback.
I've taught online for about 10 years through virtual learning environment, lecturing in professional communication, which is why I'm interested in screencasting. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I use screencasting, why that was, and also explain how I develop some tips and guidelines which might help. So let's talk about very quickly over the next few minutes. So I hope this will work. I don't have Alicia's technical expertise. I thought that's your I probably need to go to the browser.
Sorry. My next to close up. Oh, there you go. Yes, just have to.
So this little example of feedback on an assignment is just an extract from a screencast feedback on an assignment for students.
So, I'm using Gene to explore whether audiovisual screencasting can provide equivalent feedback to traditional written feedback for essays. So I'm going to go through your essay, just explaining one or two comments that might help you with future assignments. But first of all, I'd like to say that I found your essay very interesting to read. Thank you. It's very well researched and well put together. So I've just got one or two little comments that might help with future assignments. The first point is what I missed in the introduction was a little paragraph explaining to me what your approach to the assignment was. For example, that you were going to discuss various examples from your professional practice, consider whether there were constraints of truth-telling and perhaps analyse them against different theoretical frameworks. So when I got your conclusion that there are constraints in your professional practice, constraints to truth-telling, didn't quite link up with the beginning, and that would have been a nice thread had I had that throughout. Your introduction is also quite heavy in quotes. You do include a lot of quotes, which is good. It's good to have some, but I think you could perhaps reduce the number and paraphrase more, which might free up work out for more in-depth analysis of some of the examples. This was just a little case where you talked about simple choices such as font size, having equal dimensions, and I would have liked to have known a little more about that in the, if you'd give me some examples, that would be here. I think perhaps you could have gone into a little more depth about some of these topics and perhaps against certain theoretical frameworks. You say it's a duty not to reveal confidential information. Is that a societal duty or professional duty within your organisation or within your professional field? I just felt that you could have linked up the theory a little bit and perhaps with standards or and discussed that in more depth.
The reason I wanted just to show that, it's not particularly a good example necessarily, but it does show you the visual cues that you're getting my feedback, and also looking at the point in their essay, which the research that I've done has been comparing written feedback that was separate to an essay in a distance learning environment. So I felt this screencasting could perhaps help the students because they would be actually looking and hearing at the same time. So it's the visual cues that I wanted to demonstrate there and to illustrate how it could be used for feedback. So why did I start and why did I think screencasting might be useful? Most of my career has been, I've been working for 20 years as a professional editor, and with my own research into professional written communication, one of the key things key concepts that I'm aware of is document ownership. Students have been working for hours and hours on their assignments, and they've created them, they are the authors, it's their baby, and all authors have a sense of ownership for something that they've put so much energy into. Now in the HE environment, there's a lecturer-student power differential, and particularly in a distance learning environment where the students don't have face-to-face contact, there can be a feeling that there's somebody in authority out there. So first of all, it's my baby, I created this document and I don't really want to hear bad news about it, and secondly, I'm going to hear that bad news from somebody in authority, somebody in the HE institution. So there's a fear of failure, a fear of receiving that negative feedback, and of course Van Levson's politeness theory tells us that we all want to be respected, that's positive faith, so the student wants to be respected too, which makes it very frightening. So altogether, feedback is a really scary experience for students, or it can be, and more so in a distance learning environment. The literature tells us that there are problems with feedback not being understood. I think national student surveys have shown that there's an improvement on this more recently, but it is still a problem. Hughes writes about one of the problems being academic language, which I think Mike commented on earlier as well, that we're perhaps using academic language in the feedback, which of course for new students, particularly in a widening participation context, we've got to socialise those students into academic language. They're not going to understand it from the beginning. So if we tell them that their citations are all incorrectly formatted, and they haven't been in education for many years, it's not really going to help them. So that could be part of the problem. Level of critique, it's not only the content we include in feedback, but which content is important, more important. And that's something that perhaps doesn't come through in written feedback, how important is this issue that I'm being critiqued on. So perhaps a possible solution, and again I'm covering ground Mike's already covered from the audio research, is that detail and conversation, less formal language, can help to overcome some of these difficulties, which is why I started looking at screencasting. Just to return to emotions and socialisation, there is a relationship between the tutor and the student, and in a distance learning environment that has to be worked out harder. What Middleton talks about with screencasting and audio feedback is it's very personal. It is one-to-one, and that student who's been working away at their assignment actually witnesses the tutor's engagement with their work. And so that helps to build a relationship with the student, and all communication with the student is building a relationship, so that's very important. So they witness it, and it's just about their work, it's personal to them and their hard work, all the effort they put in. So in a distance learning environment, that can give the student a sense of belonging, that they are important, and that can help to build this relationship between the tutor, the lecturers and the student, because we do have duty of care to our students, and it's hard to convey that sometimes in a distance learning environment, in a non-online environment. And then I mentioned levels of critique, so not just the content of what you're putting into the feedback, but how important are the different aspects, and we can convey that through intonation better than we can black and white print. When we're giving written feedback. So, timing could be an advantage, it might be another reason why. I'm not sure about this, it's a bit controversial. I think it depends on how you deliver feedback, how you create the feedback. Because certainly when I was working in an online environment, we were writing reams of written feedback on assignments because we were teaching about professional writing, and we were giving very, very detailed feedback. But I had to review the work, and so I would review the assignment, and then I would record the screencast. So the two things are very separate for me. What I typed in my research was the difference between recording the screencast or typing out my feedback in a separate document. So for me, yes, it was faster to screencast, but it really depends how different people work. There is some research that says that, there is some research that says that audio, audio recordings are quicker. But for screencasting, I'm not sure. So, I've only got a few little tips to give. I have developed them from the literature, from analysing QAA guidelines and looking at what the best practice should be, and how any of those issues that the QAA gave us guidelines on might be affected by screencasting rather than providing written feedback. I interviewed screencasting users who I sourced from the European Socialisation for the Teaching of Academic Writing listserv. There were 3 people came forward, volunteered their experiences with screencasting, and I did a small action research project comparing written feedback and screencast feedback. So based on that, I have just 1 or 2 guidelines to share with you. These are common, of course, to all feedback, and the only reason I mention them is because you may be distracted by screencasting from remembering the core things that we have to remember about assessment. Reviewing against the assessment criteria, I know Peter always finds it irritating when people mention that, because of course we should always do that. But when I first started screencasting, what I found was, because an essay is a linear document that we tend to read in a linear way, I first started going through it in a linear way. So I was going through quite irrelevant, immaterial feedback and not staying focused on what the assessment criteria are. So I started having those assessment criteria right in front of me, even when I was doing the screencast, so that I ticked off the key ones that I had to talk about. Balancing positives and negatives. One of the interviewees had actually done a survey on their students on screencast, and one of the points that came back through that research was that, through her research, was that students felt there wasn't a balance between positives and negatives. So I put on my tips, that my guidelines, that I must make sure there was a balance. And also balance between subject matter versus academic writing. So on that particular... Sorry, am I doing something wrong? Balance between subject matter and academic writing, which again, that could be common to all feedback. Peter mentioned his workshop on feedback. This point about identifying 3 aspects, because it becomes ineffective if we give too much feedback, and students need to get a hold on some clear directions for improvement. And an overarching motivation, an overarching guideline for me in my feedback is always to try and hold on to this concept of positive phase. These students have worked very hard on their assignments and they want to be respected by us. So part of my set of guidelines is to respect, motivate and encourage students as much as possible. So, tips for the screencast. Once you've reviewed your assignment, you can identify then high and low order issues. And particularly when I was working with Jing, which was time limited to 5 minutes, it was very important to identify the high level issues and to prioritise them so that I could get them covered in the time limited screencast. And I think that's also important to remember, even if the software is not limiting you to a certain amount of time, because you want to keep students engaged, and if the feedback's too long, then they may become disinterested. So obviously the high-level issues need to be prioritised, and as I said before, don't be tempted to go in a linear fashion. If there are 3 important things and the conclusion is one of them, then jump right in those to the conclusion. Avoid minor issues which might be embarrassing. One of my students wrote that she felt very embarrassed to hear my voice actually telling her that she'd spelled a word wrong. So it's I had to learn from that as well, that I should ignore those minor things which were embarrassing for the student. So I think I'm in there. So I'm actually creating the screencast. I introduce what it's for and how they can use it. Introduce the 3 topics I'm going to. That's very important because my little research project showed that what students missed in the screencast was that ability to scan, and they had no overview. So they couldn't glance at their headings on the paper. They had to hold it in their mind. So it's very important at the beginning to give that right to talk about the way you've organised information, the fact you haven't talked about your ontology and whatever. So your 3 subjects are identified up front. If you do start with positives, for example, like I did in that example, students can feel patronised. One of the interviewees said that her students felt very patronised. They just wanted to get on with how can I improve my next assignment, what do I need to learn. So we have to be a little bit careful there too. Adapt intonation and adapt word choices appropriately for the student that you're dealing with. As it's a one-to-one feedback in the screencast, that's possible, particularly with international students if the first language is not English, then it may be necessary to slow down the pace as well. Encourage and motivate students to build a sense of connection, and this is to do with the tutor-student relationship. Review what's been covered at the end to help them hang on to that overview, the mental overview that they don't have because it's not in writing. A little bit difficult with mentioning the student's name. I tend to use the student's name, but it's not a best practice, obviously for security reasons, if anything does, unfortunately, end up on the internet in public domain. By the way, I did have the student's permission for the example I showed you, and I edited out her name. But I tend to use the student's name because I think that's the benefit, that it's a personal feedback for the student. But obviously, in my research, I'm going to have to edit out the name, so I'm not sure what to advise about that. I think you just have to be aware to be careful for security reasons. And also, of course, the screencasts have to be returned by a virtual learning environment. Very important, Amelie's done quite a bit of research in audio feedback, and I met him at the personal voice from the Society of Leicester. And he said students really do not like scripted feedback, so there's no point making a screencast and just reading out the feedback. That doesn't make it personal at all. So, I hope that's interesting for you in some way.